Welcome back to the California Conversation. I'm Tess Abraham. What comes to your mind when you hear the term wealth tax? Maybe you think about fairness, justice, equality, compassion. Those are phrases that the proponents of Proposition 40 want you to think about when you hear about the proposition on the upcoming ballot. But today I want to argue that this is about far more than just a new tax that's being imposed on people with more wealth than you or I. I think that it speaks more to what we want to encourage in society. Should a government reward incredibly hard work and innovation and achievement, or should it limit it? Should it celebrate those achievements and the success that comes from it, or should it punish it because not everyone has the same amount? These are the questions underlying the heart of Proposition 40, and I believe that they're important questions that every conservative, every Californian, and every Christian should answer before casting their ballot this November. But before we get started, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you stay up to date on all things California politics. And if you want more information or you want sources cited in compiling today's episode, you should check out the corresponding article on my website, which is linked below. So we are covering all of the propositions on the California ballot over the next several months before we have to actually vote in the November election. And the very first proposition that I want to cover is Proposition 40, which is the billionaire wealth tax. Now, if you remember, I actually covered the wealth tax back in February when it was originally just an idea. It was in the signature phase. So it was trying to raise enough signatures in order to get on the ballot. Well, unfortunately, it did raise enough signatures. And so we will be voting on it this November. Now, just as a reminder, what Proposition 40 says is, quote, billionaires living in California on January 1st of 2026 would have to pay a one-time state tax equal to 5% of their net worth. The tax would be due in 2027. So, one-time tax on 5% of the net worth of any billionaire who is living in California starting at this year. And net worth, again, is their assets minus their liabilities. Now, if you want more information on what a wealth tax is, what the impact it would have on California would be, and maybe more information just about the details and specifics of it, you should definitely go check out the previous episode that I did. I will link it up here because I break all of that down. Today, I don't want to repeat those points. Today, I want to focus on something that I believe is more important. I want to get to the heart of the underlying motivations behind why a wealth tax is even coming up in our state and why some people would support it. I want to answer questions like, why do people think that a wealth tax is morally good? Is it morally good? Does it give us a framework for a healthy, flourishing, and successful society? And if not, then why doesn't it? Because at the heart of this again is more than just a tax proposal. This is about a worldview. This is about a way that you see the world around you, the way that you view other people around you. And so it is a political philosophy that we need to understand and that we need to rightly think through of whether we agree with or disagree with and why. Now, there was a really good speech by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and you may have seen it circulating in the news in the past several weeks. He gave a speech on political terrorism, specifically about radical leftist ideology. And he had some quotes that really helped me start thinking through certain things, even like a wealth tax in California, even though it's not entirely what he was talking about. So in it, he states that radical leftist ideology is, quote, a poisonous resentment cloaked in the language of equality and justice and liberation, an overwhelming need to tear down what greater men have built, to wreck what is beautiful and what is right on behalf of people who are only filled with ugliness and have nothing else to offer the world. But listen what he goes on to say, because he goes on to explain something that directly relates to exactly what we are talking about today.
One of the criticisms you sometimes hear of communism, for example, is that it sounds good in theory, but it never works in practice. That's actually not true. Communism does not sound good in theory. The world it envisions for all of us is small, flat, gray, leveled of all exception, drained of all that is good and noble in the human soul. The world it envisions is a world without courage, a world without creativity or ambition, a world without heroes or glory or great causes to strive towards, a world without miracles. without myths, without men who rise above the rest to do incredible and extraordinary things. And the world communism envisions is a world without God.
And so I have made the argument for how a wealth tax sounds really good in theory, but does not work in practice. But today I want to get deeper. I want to dig deeper and further and get to the heart of why a wealth tax shouldn't even sound good to us at all in the first place. So here's the question to answer today. When someone creates or has extraordinary wealth, is that something as a society that we should encourage? Or is that something that our government should confiscate, curb, try to mitigate simply because it is too much? Now, to do this, to build this argument, to answer that question, we need to lay the foundation. And so the very first point that we have to answer for ourselves is creating wealth a good thing? Because if creating wealth is fundamentally immoral, if it is evil, it is something that is bad for society, then it kind of makes sense why the government would seek to even it out, why they would impose a tax. But if creation of wealth is actually a good thing, if it can be a benefit and a societal good, then a wealth tax actually just punishes something that we should be celebrating, encouraging, and striving after. So we have to understand what goes into wealth and if wealth in and of itself is right or if it's wrong. Now, the first principle to understand is that wealth takes work. It requires solving problems. It requires meeting needs. It requires inventing new things, pushing forward human advancements beyond where they have already been. And ultimately, wealth is a result of someone understanding and catering to supply and demand. So we talk about this all the time. We talk about basic economics. If there is a demand for something, then whoever creates the supply that is going to achieve that demand is the person who is going to benefit from it. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Well, if someone puts in the work to meet that demand, and if someone innovates in the world to create something that was needed that didn't exist before, why shouldn't they be compensated for that work? Why shouldn't they see benefit from the ways that they have driven forward human advancement? If you think about what it takes to build a successful business, you realize it is hard. It takes hard work. People think that all of these rich people with their own businesses just stumbled upon it. That's often not the case. Businesses start with an idea and they start with risk. Someone risks their own time. Instead of just getting a job that would be easier, that has a stable income, they put their time, their energy, their savings, their efforts, their hopes, and their dreams into building something that most likely is going to fail. They often take on debt to be able to do this. They invest their own savings in it to be able to do it. And they don't have any guarantee that the outcome is going to be positive for them. It is so much easier to get a job at a stable company and have an income that comes to you year over year that you don't really have to think about. You punch in from 9 to 5. You're not really the one who everything is at risk for, everything is at stake for. You just get part of the benefits of that company actually thriving and succeeding. It's very different if you're the person trying to forge a new path or if you're trying to create a new business. So when businesses are then successful, that means that that business has met a need in the marketplace that people have voluntarily gone and participated in. It's really easy to look at the owners of companies like Apple or Amazon or Google and despise them because we say that they are so wealthy and that they can just do whatever they want. But no one forces you to buy an iPhone or to shop off of Amazon or to use Google. All of the money that those companies and then as a result, their founders have made are a direct result of the voluntary choices made by millions of people who decided that the thing that they were buying or the service that they were paying for had a net benefit to them. And so again, we have to ask, why wouldn't the people who created those companies and put in the work and had the idea and the vision and then executed it, why wouldn't we want them to benefit for all of the time and effort that they have put in? If Jeff Bezos runs Amazon and he literally is a company that gets you goods next day, which is insane. I can just order something and it shows up on my doorstep the next day. And it's not just me that it does that for, but it's people around America, it's people around the world. It's a huge company. Why shouldn't he actually see some sort of gain in creating and developing and pushing forward such an amazing innovation that has advanced society. The reason that we wouldn't want these people to see success is because of the belief that is popular on the left, which is that wealth is a fixed pie. It says that if you succeed too much, that means that you are taking a larger slice away from someone else. So in order to achieve greatly, you have to then actually hurt other people. It means you're taking away from others. But that is not true at all. Society is not poorer for people who have created inventions, who have created and built companies and products and then benefited from them. Society is far richer because of it. Some of the wealthiest people among us, people that the left despise, even like President Trump or like Elon Musk, have built companies. They've hired employees. They've created jobs. They've generated wealth for those employees and for broader society around us. They've created innovation that didn't exist before them and probably wouldn't have existed without them. And so to despise them for that is to instead say that all of the benefits that you have received as a result of people driving forward innovation isn't enough simply because you don't have the same amount of money, but you didn't do the same amount of work. You didn't have the idea. You didn't have the knowledge. You didn't have the know-how. You didn't execute. You didn't risk everything. You haven't poured your life into it. Why should you have the same amount of money as them? Creating wealth is not inherently evil. Creating wealth is a form of excellence. And so then it naturally follows that excellence actually blesses society. It is a good thing for you and for me, even if we ourselves are not billionaires. These companies, like I already said, they provide goods and services that you use. You can think about all the technologies that you used this morning. You likely have a phone that worked as your alarm clock. You likely made coffee in some sort of coffee maker. You probably drove a car today, whether to work or to the grocery store or to the gym. You drove on paved roads that were accessible and smooth and able for you to be able to use. And even now, you have some sort of internet connection to be able to watch the episode of this show. Every single day, you use goods and services that were created by other people. And so those people, by creating them and by generating wealth and by being very wealthy because they're successful, have actually made your life better. This is how civilization advances. It advances through innovation, and innovation is a primary creator of wealth. And so yes, there of course is self-interest. The person who's generating the wealth maybe wants the wealth, but at the same time, self-interest can then serve greater interest. And honestly, it's a mischaracterization to say that every single wealthy person did what they did because they wanted to pursue wealth. Sometimes some of the best innovators actually just care about the innovation. They care about the human advancement. They care about contributing to society. And the wealth is a benefit that comes to them. It's a happy consequence of the hard work that they have put in. It's a byproduct that they then pour into charities, that they pour into other organizations, and that they then pour into investments into new innovations that keep the cycle going. And so if every single person is the exact same, they have the same gifts and abilities, they have the same skills, and they produce the same amount of wealth and the same amount of output for society, then we are not going to be where we are today. Instead, when we recognize that people are different, that they have different capacities, that they have different giftings, they have different skill levels, and that they subsequently will develop different amounts, they will generate different amounts of wealth, that is when we start to see that we can pursue, we can incentivize, and then we can benefit from the excellence of others. And so a flourishing, a healthy society seeks to cultivate more of this, not to actually shut it down or limit it. But Proposition 40 does not cultivate this. The key problem with this proposition is that it basically says that if you are too successful or if you are too wealthy, that is something that becomes a problem. And so the state is going to walk in and it's going to demand that you hand over some of that wealth that you yourself have earned or generated. But this mentality has a name, and it might be uncomfortable to hear, but this is what Scripture calls envy. And just right off the bat, I want to make a distinction because envy is different from justice. And if someone gains their wealth through exploitation or through fraud or through theft, then justice requires that that person be held accountable. But that's very different from envy, which doesn't really care about how you became successful or doesn't care if you became successful on your own terms and created something good for society in the meantime. Instead, envy is just troubled because someone has more than you do. So justice would ask, were any laws broken? Was anyone taken advantage of? Were rights violated in the creation of this wealth? And those are good questions to ask and should be asked. But envy instead asks, why should they have something that I don't? When we create an incentive structure for envy in our society, then it makes it impossible for any of us to celebrate or be genuinely happy and excited for someone else's accomplishments and the blessings that they have as a result of those accomplishments. And so that's how we end up with a state that's imposing a wealth tax that literally just says that people over a certain asset threshold have to give up a portion of their wealth to the state. Literally, what is the purpose of that? Like, what is the reason beyond what they say they're going to do with the money? Why should those specific individuals be on the hook to give the state money just because they have it? That literally doesn't make sense. The only reason is you have it, we want it, and so give it to us. That is not rooted in any sort of good sort of rationale or motivation. And the real danger is that envy is easily disguisable as virtue. And we see that our politicians do this very easily because instead of using the word envy, of just saying, I want what I don't have, they use language of fairness, equality, justice, and redistribution. And so you hear about things like a wealth tax cloaked in this sort of language. And that's how well-meaning Californians, who are not motivated by greed or envy necessarily, they get on board with a wealth tax because they think that it's the just thing to do. They think it's going to help the poor and that there's a responsibility to take from the wealthy in order to help the poor. They think that the rich don't pay their fair share and so tax the rich. We hear all of these sorts of phrases, but the purposes of a wealth tax are not noble. Instead, it pushes forward the idea that if I can't rise to the level that you are at, then you owe me something. Maybe instead, I should make it so that you should be brought down to where I am. And then that's how we end up with socialism or communism that says that we all should be at the same level, the redistribution of wealth, so that everyone is not equal in terms of their worth or value, but is equal in terms of what they have. So then, if those are poor motivations, what is the kind of civilization that we should be trying to build? And the way we answer that question is by seeing that whatever we reward in society is what we get more of. And so Proposition 40 is dangerous, not just because it's going to have bad effects on our state, which it is, but it's also dangerous because it communicates a clear message. It tells young people, new entrepreneurs, people who would aspire to be future inventors. It tells them that at some point, your success becomes a problem. At some point, you having more, regardless of what you do with that wealth, regardless of how much you have contributed to society in generating that wealth, regardless of it, the wealth itself becomes something that the state has a right to just take away because it wants to use for different purposes. That is not going to then inspire more entrepreneurs, more businesses, more inventors, because what you reward is what you get more of. So when you instead reward equity and redistribution, that's what you're going to get more of, is more people who are not aspiring to greatness, but who instead are seeking to tear down the others in their society who are great. And this is what I loved so much in Marco Rubio's speech. I want to repeat this part that really pertains to this topic, because again, he said, quote, "The world it envisions for all of us is small, flat, gray, leveled of all exception, drained of all that is good and noble in the human soul, a world without courage, creativity, ambition, heroes, glory, great causes to strive toward, without men who rise above the rest to do incredible and extraordinary things." That is exactly what a world that pursues a wealth tax looks like, is not encouraging people to go out and be great, because if people go out and be great, they are just punished for having been great because they're too great and other people were not great. And so now we need to level it all out. That doesn't make any sense. Great civilizations don't fear the greatness. They want to encourage it. They want to inspire excellence. They want to push others to achieve it. And then we celebrate it for what it is, to see how much it has contributed and how good it really is. But if we pass in California, Proposition 40, we continue to pursue the small, flat, and gray world where men are too afraid to pursue or see value in rising above the rest to do those incredible things. And so we need more of encouraging exceptionalism here in California. We need less political control and regulatory control, and we certainly need less taxes. And so if wealth is good and if wealth can benefit society and we want to encourage excellence, then how should we think about wealth? Because there also has to be a balance. We see biblically that wealth is not idolized, certainly is not idolized, but wealth is also not demonized inherently. And so how are we going to balance in tension the reality that wealth can lead to all sorts of chaos and disorder and problems in society, and yet at the same time, it can also help society, can benefit it, and so we shouldn't discourage it. The way that we do this is we communicate to people that the goal is to pursue excellence and steward what you have been given. That's what we want to do. Some people, when they pursue excellence, is going to take them, like Elon Musk, to a rocket company that does really wild and great things, or to create electric cars, or to invest in Twitter to free the bird. Some people's pursuit of excellence is going to generate far more wealth for them. And some people, it is not going to generate that massive amount of wealth. But regardless, you pursue what is excellent because it is what is right. It is what is best. It is because that is what we are designed to do as people who are created in the image of God, who himself is creative and excellent and does all things well. And then we turn around and we take the benefits of that pursuit and we steward them wisely. And so Christianity and the Bible's view on wealth actually offers us something very different from greed and from envy. Greed would say, I have what I have and it's mine, and I'm not giving it to anybody else, it's mine. And then envy would say, you should have what you have taken away because you have too much. But instead, what I believe would actually help society is the idea of stewardship, which says I have been given much because everything that I have ultimately belongs to a creator outside of me, belongs to God. And so I have a responsibility to be faithful with the things that I have been given. When we see it that way, then we want to encourage in society good values, though, that are rooted in what is true. And those good values would be responsibility with what you have, gratitude and humility for what you have, and then a faithfulness for how you are going to use what you have for the better. When we do this, this guards us against idolizing the wealthy among us and saying that they are the best and we worship them. But it also guards us against resenting the wealthy, because instead we are grateful for what we have. We are focused just on the things that we need to do. I'm looking at my own individual responsibility. What do I need to do today? How am I going to pursue the good, the true, the beautiful, the excellence in my own life? I'm not going to look at what someone else has and compare my life to theirs and then envy what they have. I'm going to be grateful for all the blessings I've been given, and I'm going to work hard to steward them for the glory of God. Because ultimately, whatever you're entrusted with is what you will be answerable to God for. And so I actually don't envy the billionaires because they have been entrusted with much. And so that much is required of them in how they stewarded it. And there's actually a lot more opportunity to go wrong with how you're stewarding your money. And so you just have to worry about your own self, your own family, your own spiritual condition, your own life, not worrying about how everyone else is using their money or finances, but instead looking at what you've been giving, being grateful for it, and then using it to bless others. That is not the government's job. The government should restrain evil. It should punish when there's wrongdoing. Like I said, that line of justice, if someone pursued wealth in a way that is illegal or a way that is hurtful to others in society, then that's where government steps in. But government is not God. And so it's not up to government to look into your heart and tell you how you should be using your money and say, well, we need to redistribute it to the poor. That is not actually the role of the government. And so what we need to do is cultivate better values in our society. Because honestly, just practically speaking, not every billionaire is great. I am not naive to think that every single billionaire has created great wealth for society. There's a lot of rich people that got rich in quite stupid ways, and it feels a little bit unfair that they have so much money. But again, they're responsible for what they have been given. And so I want to change my community, my society, the people around me to see we ought to be people who are faithful faithful stewards. And then from there, change little by little, expanding outward so that we encourage those who have great wealth to use it in good ways. But taxing the wealthy in order to redistribute their money in a way that the state is going to define as good, excellent, and moral is absolutely not the answer. And so Proposition 40 is definitely not the answer. A wealth tax is not going to eliminate poverty. It is not going to prevent greed. It is not going to satisfy those who are discontent with their own financial condition and envious of people who have more than them. And it's not going to heal our culture or encourage greatness in our state. And so I just want to borrow the words of Secretary of State Marco Rubio once more to say, one of the criticisms you hear of a wealth tax is that it sounds good in theory, but never works in practice. But that is not true. A wealth tax does not sound good in theory. The California it envisions for all of us is small, flat, gray, leveled of all exception, drained of all that is good and noble in the human soul. If you want to live in a state where extraordinary people are encouraged to do extraordinary things, then the choice is clear. We must vote no on Proposition 40. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was helpful for you as you navigate life in our state and as you decide how you're going to vote on the upcoming ballot propositions in November. If you love this show, please spread the word and share it with your friends, family, and fellow Californians. And I'll see you back here next week for another episode of the California Conversation.